Hi, Victoria, and thank you so much for joining the Feel Good Spine podcast. I am so excited to have you here and learn all about the Scoliosis Sisters and your social media page and everything that you do in the scoliosis world, as well as your story with fusion. I know you've definitely got an interesting story with fusion. I'm very excited to hear about, and just your journey with scoliosis in general. So I'm going to bring it over to you. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and the work that you currently do with scoliosis?
Yeah, so thank you very much for having me. So yeah, I am 26. I'm currently living in London, and I'm currently studying for my counselling psychology doctorate. So kind of training to become a psychologist, basically. So yeah, I'm on my first year out of 3, so still got a long way to go.
Wow.
But prior to that, I did kind of my psychology undergrad. I worked in New York briefly with kind of recovering alcoholics and drug addicts, and then I've worked in London with children and young people kind of dealing with anxiety and depression. And kind of from that work, I think I've become really passionate about mental health and scoliosis.
Yay.
That's kind of a topic, and I'm hoping to kind of do my doctoral thesis on the association between scoliosis and mental health, whether there is an association there, and
Yeah.
also kind of, the experience of young people who are having surgery and what mental health support that we can possibly kind of offer, or what might be useful for young people. So that's kind of, my area of passion at the moment, but again, a long road on that. So yeah, first year out of 3 working on my thesis, but it's been really exciting already, and definitely kind of, an area that I'm really passionate about and learning lots about. And then
Yeah.
on the side, I just have my kind of social media account, so Scoliosis Sisters. Again, I kind of set it up I think a year or 2 ago, again, as just kind of a little place for me to kind of share some of my experiences, kind of share a couple of mental health tips kind of alongside kind of scoliosis. I also kind of recently ran I say recently, October, ran the London Marathon
Wow.
for SORC, which is the Scoliosis Association UK.
Yeah.
Raised kind of nearly £2,000 for them, or just over £2,000, I think it was. Then
Wow.
was, really, I think, again, kind of to link it all back to mental health, was probably really helpful for my mental health as well, kind of
Yeah.
that right experience.
Yeah. Oh,
That's pretty much me at the moment.
amazing. No, that's awesome. Wow. Well, congratulations on running the marathon, because that is really, really tricky. I did a half marathon once and almost died. So congratulations on doing the whole marathon. And how did you find that on your curbs and on your fusion? Did you get any pain, or was it okay?
No, I was absolutely, it was absolutely
Oh,
fine.
yes.
I think that I had, pain in my legs the next day, but
Yeah.
that was
Yeah.
nothing to do with having spinal fusion. But
Yeah.
it was completely fine on my back. I kind of got a really good pair of running trainers, and I'd
Yeah.
seen a physio, and kind of did the training properly and did enough training.
Yeah.
So I kind of got sensible about that side of things. But had
That's
absolutely
very,
no
yeah.
issues with my back at all. Yeah.
I'm so glad to hear that. And that is so important, doing the proper training, because when I did mine, I didn't really train properly. And I think that really I had the worst hip pain after on my right hip. And I just remember thinking, I was like, that's probably not good for my scoliosis. And so yeah, anyone listening, if you're about to run a marathon or a half marathon, please do the appropriate training first, because it makes a big difference.
Definitely.
Yeah. But that's awesome. So I'm really, really glad that we have you, and that you're interested in helping people with the mental health effects of scoliosis and of spinal fusion, especially when you're younger. I do feel like that's something that we are missing in the world, in the scoliosis world. I definitely didn't have any support when I was younger. So I don't know what it's like now. I mean, I'm 31 now, and I was diagnosed when I was 13. So hopefully that there's a little bit more, but I'm glad that there's people, like you in the world, that are bringing light on this, and that we can talk about it and post it all over social media. So people can listen and hopefully feel not alone, which is the whole point of this conversation and podcast. So coming on to my next question, I want to hear, my listeners, we all want to hear about your journey with scoliosis, your journey with fusion. So could you just tell us a little bit about your scoliosis diagnosis, how this led to surgery, the surgery itself, recovery, and everything after that? Basically, I know it's going to be a long story, but I'm here for it. I got my coffee and I'm ready.
So I was diagnosed when I was 16, so that was 2013. And kind of like quite a lot of people, I think it was a shock. I was doing a dance exam, weirdly enough, with my friend, and I kind of said afterwards, oh, my shoulder hurts a bit. And she kind of looked at me and went, oh, it's really swollen. It must have dislocated or something dramatic. So my mum took me to A&E, and kind of the hospital said, well, this seems like a longer kind of issue. This hasn't just happened.
Wow.
They suggested I kind of went to the doctors. So I went to the doctor, and then was kind of referred on to the consultant, had the x-rays and everything. I had no previous suspicions, kind of there was no indication previously that I had anything wrong with my spine. I had absolutely no pain whatsoever.
Yeah.
And then I remember, we saw the x-ray with the consultant, and I remember my mum said there was no part of your spine that was straight, and it was just kind of this shock to us all that I'd been kind of wandering around like this and nobody had noticed.
Yeah.
um, but yeah, so I had an S curve. So again, I think that sometimes is quite common that it's not picked up because you kind of almost look quite straight, but
Yeah.
underneath everything else kind of.
Yeah.
So it was an S curve that, it wasn't a huge degree. It was probably, I think from memory, it was about 47 and a 43 curve. So kind of
Okay.
not huge numbers compared to some other people. But my consultant also said that I had an added complication where instead of having 5 lumbar bones, I have 5, but the bottom 2 were both fused together kind of just naturally. And he said it sometimes happens at birth, that kind of you only basically have kind of 4 lumbar bones.
Hmm.
So he said this would add a complication with fusion, that if he went all the way down as far as he wanted to, I would kind of completely lose a lot of flexibility,
Hmm.
potentially wouldn't be able to do a lot of the things that I do now and wanted to do. So at that point, I was still probably in denial and didn't really want the surgery, and was kind of eager to do anything else that would mean that I wouldn't have to have surgery.
Yeah.
But lots of kind of long conversations with my parents, with the consultant, with a physio as well, that I was really lucky to kind of have. And I still go and see her 10 years later.
Wow.
But it kind of, came to the conclusion that actually surgery was probably for the best, just given that I wasn't having any pain, and the surgeon said, actually, soon you will start having pain anyway. I was kind of at an age where he said recovery would be quicker. I kind of was still, throughout all of this, I was doing my GCSE exams, kind of leaving school, year 11. I was moving to a new school in September. So kind of, all those social aspects of trying to be a normal teenager on top of that.
Yeah.
But we kind of came to the conclusion that actually I think surgery was the best option for me. And I was lucky to be under private health insurance with my family, so we could kind of pick and choose to an extent when the surgery was. So my initial diagnosis was in the April, I think, and I ended up having surgery in the November.
Okay.
So quite a short time frame
Yeah.
from, I think, diagnosis to my operation. But again, we kind of chose, because I was then going into my A-level exams and kind of
Mm.
my final years at school, and it was the decision that if I had it in November, I wouldn't miss a huge ton of school, and could kind of get back to exams a bit quicker.
Yeah.
So I think I did 4 days in hospital, and then recovery for me was pretty straightforward. Again, I was quite determined that I was kind of going to get back to everything. So was returned to dance. I was doing about 4 dance classes a day before my surgery, and returned to dance, I think 3 months after. I did kind of a big dance exam 6 months after surgery, so kind of definitely just threw myself back into life
Good
post-op.
for you. Yeah.
So yeah, that was kind of my initial surgery. I then kind of had a second surgery about 5 years later. I was getting constant pain in my right shoulder.
Mm.
So again, I was kind of going to a physio, and she was kind of trying to work through it, but the pain was still there. And I'd spoken to the consultant, and kind of he agreed that the fusion was all kind of settled, but this pain still wasn't going away. So yeah, again, after kind of multiple conversations, he basically informed me that what he thought the issue was one of my screws was kind of rubbing against the skin or my muscle, and basically calling, I think he called it a bursa, but basically kind of an internal blister,
Mm.
kind of under the skin, which was kind of causing this pain. So he agreed that he could take out the kind of a little chunk of the metalwork basically. So I think it was 2 hooks and then one of the screws, and a couple of inches of the rod on just the right side. So that was, yeah, pretty much exactly 5 years after my first surgery.
Mm.
So removed that. That was a lot of an easy recovery. I think it was about 2 weeks I had off work, and then was kind of back to normal. He reopened the same scar, so it kind of, it's a little bit messy at the top, but it kind of did a second scar or anything.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was kind of, yeah, my initial diagnosis, and then my second surgery that's a little bit less common, I think.
Wow. Yeah. Very, very interesting. Yeah, that's that second surgery, and that kind of made me cringe, just the thought of that blister being underneath the skin. But I guess it's all part of the fun, having scoliosis and then then the surgery. But it's amazing that that you managed to get that second surgery. And does it bother you at all now?
Not that right shoulder quite so much. I do have kind of, again, as probably a lot of people who've had scoliosis or the fusion, I get very sort of tight neck and shoulders,
Yeah.
because kind of a lot of my movement is just in my shoulders, and when you're hunched over a desk kind of doing a lot of work, that's the only bit of you that's maybe taking a lot of that tension. So kind of that typically is my problem area.
Yeah.
But kind of that right shoulder, less so. Again, I had a similar, it was probably a couple of years ago, I had a similar kind of further down in my mid back, where again it felt like there was kind of one of the screws that just kind of sits quite close to the surface for me. And
Mm.
we again kind of had similar conversations about, well, do we start taking that out, or, but actually that pain has kind of eased off for me now, so
Oh,
it's
that's
staying in for now.
yeah. Good. I guess I wanted to ask as well, when you got diagnosed, did they offer you bracing, or did they say that it was too late for that now? Because I guess you were 16 when you got diagnosed.
Yeah, to my memory, kind of bracing wasn't a big conversation that we had at all. So I assume, as I say from memory, that I was, yeah, probably fully grown,
Yeah.
kind of had reached my full height, and that bracing actually wasn't really going to be particularly helpful for me at
Yeah.
that time. So yeah, bracing wasn't really something that was mentioned much to my memory,
Yeah.
and I think it was pretty quickly either surgery or kind of watchful waiting and seeing what
Mm.
happens. But we decided that didn't quite fit for me at that time. So yeah, the
Yeah.
surgery was.
What did they mention anything about like alternative exercises like the Schroth method or scoliosis boot camps or anything like that? I know they didn't with me, but I'm always curious, like what they mentioned to other people during their diagnosis, or was it just wait and see?
Again, I think they did mention a little bit. The surgeon, not so, he kind of said there's other methods out there, but I'm not sure that he was quite a place where he wanted to kind of high. I think there was still research around them, and kind of
Mm.
it wasn't sure whether they were fully beneficial. So he said, kind of go away and have a look and
Yeah.
kind of do some exploration of your own. But he kind of wasn't championing any.
Yeah.
Um, and I do remember, yeah, I did have a look with my parents and we did think about some of them, but I think again there was a little bit of concern around kind of their effectiveness at the
Mm.
time, and actually kind of it was a lot of work. I mean, even at the time I was, as I say, seeing a physio, and there was a point when I was doing probably about an hour of physio exercises
Mm.
every day, because the agreement with my surgeon was if I could keep my lower back flexible, he wouldn't have to fuse quite as low.
Right.
Um, so I was doing a lot of kind of physio exercises anyway. And I think the idea for me kind of having to keep up those exercises and
Yeah.
kind of having that sort of constant, yeah, thing that you had to kind of do and be working on
Yeah.
didn't quite fit. And I think my mum was I was kind of planning to go off to uni, and my mum was like, are you really going to keep up these exercises at
Yeah.
uni? Or actually kind of it was the idea that surgery could kind of, I think to an extent it was this idea that surgery would just fix it
Yeah.
and it would then be fine. That's not quite the reality of it. But it was kind of, yeah, that you could kind of get over the surgery and then get on with
Yeah.
life, I
Yeah.
think was kind of the
Yeah.
thinking behind our decision. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think especially for teenagers that age, trying to get them to do exercises every day is impossible, or
Mm.
very difficult at the least anyway. So it is a really tough time when it comes to making these decisions. And I am glad that, it was mentioned to you and that they did say to go and have a think about it anyway. But yeah, it's a tough decision when it comes to that, because back then I remember looking and seeing they had like a 6 weeks. I'm British and I was diagnosed in England as well, and there somewhere in England there was like a 6 week scoliosis boot camp, but it was like thousands, it was like £6,000, I remember, and I'm like 14, 15 or whatever, and I just like found it on Google and I was like, one day I'm going to save up and I'm going to go to the scoliosis boot camp, which I never ended up doing because I never had that much money. And unfortunately, my parents never did either. So
Yeah.
I never got to go. But it was just interesting that they had these other methods. I don't even know if they still do that in England or if it's something different now. But it is always good to have a look around and do your own research as well. But you've always got to do what's best for you and what feels right at the time. And absolutely, when you're about to go off to university, last thing you need to do is an hour of exercises every day. I totally get that. Okay, so moving on, how would you say that your scoliosis and your fusion affects your life now?
I would love to say that it doesn't, but that wouldn't be quite true.
Yeah.
Um, I think, yeah, definitely at times it does, as I mentioned, kind of, yeah, very tight kind of shoulders and neck kind of pain from that, sometimes kind of headaches as well, kind of
Hmm.
come up for me. And I know some of it's my own. I should definitely do a little bit more yoga and kind of prioritize a little bit more kind of movement in my neck. But I think it's sometimes one of those where when you're hard at work or kind of doing an office job, or kind of, as I found in my doctorate degree, sometimes it kind of that falls slowly to the bottom of the list on kind of the list of other things that you've got to do that day. So yeah, I'd say definitely kind of still pain. I wouldn't, luckily for me, I'd say it's not quite daily.
Hmm.
Um, when it gets bad or when I need to go and see my physio, then it probably does start kind of affecting me every day. But usually I'd say a couple of times a week I'll maybe notice if I've done quite a lot of work at the desk, or kind of, yeah, need to move around a little bit more. So I think that's the main kind of effect that I have now.
Yeah.
As I said again, kind of this kind of other loose screw or protruding screw that I have kind of sometimes again kind of causes pain. And I definitely get pain in my shoulders when I'm traveling. So
Hmm.
kind of a long train journey or flight. Again, that's kind of one of those times when I can notice and remember that I've had surgery, but I'm definitely lucky enough that I have plenty of times where I forget that I had surgery, or kind of am able to just do everything the same as everybody else, and kind of have to remind myself, oh yeah, I did have quite a serious back surgery. Should I really be doing this? um, I think in terms of the scar as well, again, it's not something that has always been on my mind. Luckily, again, for me, I've kind of just been able to get on with it, and kind of,
Mm.
people might see it if I'm on holiday in a bikini, and actually people might think, oh, that's a long scar, why she got that? But actually it doesn't really affect me. I think for me, I've always said that with a scoliosis scar, because it's on my back and I can't see it, I sometimes forget that it's there. And I think maybe if people have had other surgeries where they can see the scar, or they have a daily reminder of it, I wonder if that would be kind of harder to deal with, or something that personally I would maybe struggle with more. But for me, because I can't actually see what my scar looks like myself, it's kind
Yeah.
of, luckily again, kind of never been a huge kind of concern for me, or a barrier to me kind of wearing anything. I wore a backless dress to my year 13 prom, which would have been kind of a year or two after surgery. So the scar was probably still quite fresh, but that was the dress I wanted to wear. So that
Oh,
was the dress I wore. So yeah, very
good
lucky.
for
But
you.
luckily for me, it's kind of not had too much of an impact outside of kind of the surgeries and
Yeah.
some. It's not been too much of a burden, I guess would
Yeah.
be very
That,
lucky.
that's awesome. That's really good to hear, because I know obviously self-image issues are quite a big thing with scoliosis, whether you have fusion or not. We do fear wearing backless dresses and doing anything that shows our scoliosis or our fusion scars. And I think it's good that you pointed out that it is on your back, and you don't have that daily reminder, which is very lucky, and something to be grateful for in a way, because I can't imagine if it was on the front, like right down your middle, it would be a different situation. So yeah, that's a very interesting way to look at things. I also wonder, with your fusion surgery, did they manage, how much of the curvature did they manage to correct? Do you feel like you're pretty straight now? Because I know with some fusion corrections have not gone so well, and people are still kind of lopsided, and I just wondered, like, do you feel like, how was the result of your surgery?
I don't know the exact degrees that they put me back to, but I would say I am pretty straight. Yes, kind of, to look straight at me, you kind of wouldn't realize. If I look very closely, my hips are still a little bit wonky, and one side of my waist comes in more than the other.
Mm,
Um, and I guess in terms of, body image, that has more so than the scar. I think that has been sometimes kind of a worry for
mm,
me, of, oh, kind of, it looks like my hips really sticking out, or that my waist is uneven. So that has sometimes been more of a concern for me. Um, but again, I think I've been sort of lucky enough that I've had a really sort of supportive group of friends and kind of family, and actually, if you look really closely, nobody is kind of dead straight or dead kind of
yes,
symmetrical. Um,
exactly.
so yeah, lots of my friends have kind of said, oh well, my shoulder's a bit weird, or kind of one leg's longer than the other, or their hips kind of don't sit exactly straight. And I think it's one of those where sometimes, we're very critical of ourselves,
Hmm.
and we never look at somebody else in as much detail as we're looking at ourselves.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's been difficult at times, and definitely during, again, my teenage years. I think my year 11 prom, so before I had surgery, but I'd just been diagnosed. When I look back at pictures now, I can definitely see that things were uneven, and I kind of think, oh, well, why did I choose that dress? Feel like it highlights it. But again, I think that's probably the headspace that I was in at the time as well, that
Yeah.
those pictures, though it was fun and I had a nice time at my prom, actually I was really going through some other stuff at the same
Yeah.
time. So those pictures maybe don't quite feel like a happy memory. Whereas the year 13 prom where I wore the backless dress, that feels like a much kind of more accepting time for me, and I'd kind of come through the surgery and things were probably feeling much better for me at that time. So yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful. That is a beautiful story. And I do find, yeah, that the acceptance is a hard part. It's a really hard part to get that acceptance. And I feel like it's something that all of us with scoliosis go through, and fusion. Like I didn't accept my scoliosis for years. Like coming like 17 years, I just pretended it didn't exist and I would hide it. And it just like we go through this whole process of trying to be in denial, I guess, and hopefully, if you just don't think about it, maybe it will go away. But unfortunately, that is not the case. It doesn't just go away. So it is the sooner you can accept it and wear those backless dresses, and wear them with pride. And if people ask questions, you just answer them and let them know your journey and your story, and remember that no one is perfect and everyone is a little bit wonky, or they've got something going on with their own bodies, and no one is judging you as much as you think that people are judging you. Like everyone's in their own head, they're thinking about themselves, they're not thinking about you and your spine and your scar or anything like that. So we, like you said, we really are our worst critics.
Yes.
Yeah. Great. So coming on to my next question, with all of this, with your scoliosis, the fusion, the whole experience, how would you say that your mental health has been affected?
Yeah, so I think again, this is something that I've really sort of reflected on probably more recently, and kind of looking into my doctoral studies and kind of doing all the research. So one area, kind of like we were just talking about actually, is kind of there's this idea of the 5 stages of grief, which are obviously kind of linked to the loss of a loved one or somebody that we care about. But there's also research that they were originally kind of termed in terms of being diagnosed with a long-term illness or a long-term condition. And I think kind of from what I've read and looked at, that they can kind of be linked quite nicely almost into scoliosis, and often kind of the things that we deal with. So the kind of 5 stages are anger, denial,
Yeah.
kind of bargaining of, oh well, if I try this then maybe I won't have to have surgery, depression, and then kind of acceptance. But it's this idea that actually they're not linear, we can kind of move up and down them. And I definitely have moments of acceptance, but then I definitely go back to moments of anger, and why did I have to have surgery, and why does it happen to me, and
Yeah.
why does my back hurt, and why can't I sit on a flight without getting pain. So I think it's quite nice to kind of have that model and be able to kind of move among those. So I think for me, yeah, I definitely sat between anger and denial for a long time. Between diagnosis and surgery, I was definitely in denial, didn't want to talk about it. My mum was like, well, we kind of have to talk, it's quite a big thing that's coming up, we have to talk about it. And I was like, no. Didn't want to kind of, so the Scoliosis Association UK had kind of a meetup in Hyde Park of kind of young girls who were experiencing scoliosis, and my mum was like, let's go, it'll be a really good opportunity. And I was like, absolutely did not want to go. I did go, and actually it was really helpful, and I met some lovely young girls who kind of recently had surgery, who were able to kind of be really helpful. And I think it was also probably quite helpful for my parents as well. But yeah, I definitely remember dragging my feet and really walking about 10 steps behind my parents because I did not want to be there. But yeah, I think for me it was definitely kind of anger and frustration, and that's still at times I kind of get that if I am in pain, or like I recently went away with some friends, and kind of I was, oh, my shoulder hurts, and I was kind of getting frustrated that it hurt, rather than being a bit kinder to myself and thinking, oh well, we've had a long day, we've been wandering around doing all this stuff, I should probably just kind of take some painkillers and relax a little bit. Actually, I tend to enter into this frustration mindset. It's still something that I'm kind of working on. I think also, again, in terms of mental health, it's again the anxiety at having surgery. It's a major surgery, a really often quite young age, when you're just wanting to kind of be the same as everybody else, you're wanting to blend in, you don't want to stick out, and suddenly you're being told, well, actually there's all these things that are different about you. But I think, again, kind of, though, it's really important to highlight the importance of anxiety at surgery, and kind of put in, hopefully, kind of coping mechanisms, or people that people going through surgery can speak to, and kind of giving a support network.
Mm.
Actually, it's really important to say that it's normal to feel anxious about such a huge surgery, and kind of, you're supposed to feel nervous and worried about it, because it's a huge deal, and kind of something that actually even an adult would struggle with. So asking a 16-year-old to go through it is a major, kind of a huge thing. So I think it's really important to name the anxiety at surgery, but also not kind of over label it. Sometimes I think having conversations about mental health is really, really useful, but there's sometimes this idea of, oh, well, I'm anxious about something, so I must have anxiety, and kind of, actually, it's normal to feel anxious about these things, and kind of then putting in those coping mechanisms of talking to other people is kind of really useful. But actually saying it's okay to feel anxious about this, or to feel frustrated or angry or kind of upset or cry about it, and whatever way kind of helps you, I think is important to kind of validate and say that it's normal, and not kind of try and shut down any of those emotions. I also guess one other thing that, again, in my research recently, I found is this idea of post-traumatic growth.
Mm.
And it's this idea that when we go through something traumatic or kind of life-changing, that actually there can be some really positive outcomes. So this idea of kind of resilience, and we kind of increased independence, maybe kind of more confidence. And I think for me, if I think about it, I probably did build up quite a lot of resilience going through surgery and scoliosis at that age, and kind of, a little bit of independence. And to kind of link back to the marathon, a lot of people were quite surprised. They said, oh, did you run it with anybody? Did you do it with anybody? And I said, no, I just did it by myself. And weirdly for me, that almost linked to surgery a little bit, that, obviously I had a huge support network, and really lucky to have really loving parents and kind of family around me, but ultimately you're the one going through the surgery and going through the recovery. And for me, that was almost similar to the marathon. I was the one running it. So I think actually sometimes looking at those positives can be really helpful as well, that actually it does build a sense of resilience, and it does prove to yourself that you can go through hard things and difficult things and get through them, and probably come out a better person than I went in. So for me, again, I was really lucky to kind of not be hugely affected with my mental health, because I know there's a lot of people out there who really struggle with really difficult kind of aspects of their mental health. But for me, some of those little bits, but then also trying to sometimes see the positives, have been helpful as well.
Yeah, 100%. I completely agree. And I have experienced the same, the anger and denial and all those emotions for years, and they do come and go. I still do get angry now, even though I've, now I work in the industry and I talk about scoliosis all day. Like, I'll still wake up and like my neck will hurt or something, and I'm just like, for goodness sake, like, why me? Those thoughts are still there. And even though I do appear very positive and everything on social media, and I do believe that staying positive is so important, because it's very easy to focus on the negative sides of scoliosis and of fusion and of the whole experience. But like you said, there are actually positive things that come out of this whole ordeal that we have to go with, including the resilience. I really do find that people with scoliosis are very resilient and stronger and mentally, more confident. All these things that you said, I do genuinely believe that we grow up and we learn to deal with this big experience that no one really understands unless you have scoliosis. So it's a whole journey that we have to go on, and in a way, I'm grateful for it, for making me the person that I am today. I don't know if I would be this resilient and strong without the whole experience. And maybe you feel the same way, like who would we even be today without it? You know? So we have to be positive and look at, you know, understand those parts of it as well. It's not all gloom and doom, and scoliosis does make us who we are and stronger and hopefully better. Like you know, it makes me want to help people more and understand what other people are going through, and, you know, humble, you know, with it. Like who knows what I would be like without scoliosis. I think it really kind of brings me down, centers me, and hopefully other people as well. You're like, okay, like we, you know, we really have to deal with this, and we can use this opportunity to also help other people going through the same thing. So yeah, I love that point. I think that was really, really good. Thank you. Awesome. So coming on a little bit to more about you, and what you do currently for yourself to help yourself physically and mentally with your scoliosis. For example, like, are you doing exercises? Do you meditate? Like, how do you take care of your physical and mental health?
So for me, yeah, I should definitely be better at doing exercises. But yeah, I try to do kind of some yoga, and definitely at the moment I'm entering a kind of real phase of a lot of university assignments. So it's a lot of sitting at a desk. So I'm really trying to kind of incorporate at least kind of 10 minutes of kind of yoga into my day. And also I think yoga really helps me mentally as well. Meditation for me has never been particularly helpful, and I think that's kind of one really important thing as well with scoliosis and just mental health in general, is actually what works for you and what doesn't.
Yeah.
I've always found that kind of exercise and moving a little bit more helps me. So if I'm not feeling particularly active, just a little bit of yoga is quite helpful, or actually going out for a run has always kind of been quite useful for me. With my day job as well, kind of working with mental health can sometimes be quite kind of emotional and tiring, and draining. So kind of leaving the house and going out for a run and just kind of putting some headphones in, listening to a podcast or some music is kind of a way that really helps me to kind of switch off. Sometimes I find as well, when my back does hurt, and this is not advice that I'm giving to other people, but if kind of my shoulders are feeling a bit tight, I'll go out for a bit of a walk or a run anyway, because I'm kind of like, well, it kind of hurts anyway. It's not going to make it any worse. Just go 5 minutes down the road, and if I have to come back, then I can. But actually, for me, I've sometimes found that that's actually helped by kind of moving. It's been kind of beneficial for my back to feel a little bit better. And even if it hasn't helped, I've never been in more pain when I've come back. It's kind of always just stayed the same. So I'm kind of like, well, at least I'm feeling mentally a little bit better because I've left the house and I've gone out and done something. Again, that kind of might not work for everybody, but that's kind of something that has worked for me. Dance as well, as I said, kind of when I was first diagnosed and had the surgery, and at uni I did a lot of dance. Less so now as I've kind of grown up, and I think there's less kind of adult dance classes out there, but I've recently kind of found one in London and been going occasionally, which again has been really helpful for me mentally and physically. My surgeon kind of always said that dance is really good for me, and kind of keeping up flexibility would always be really helpful. So I think that's kind of been something as well that I'm hoping to keep up with. But I think it's also just knowing that each day might look a bit different. So for me, sometimes if I'm in that bad mood, and my housemate knows this about me, that I'll kind of put my hood up, or I'll put a hoodie on and put my hood up, and then that's me shutting out the world, and I don't want to talk to anybody, and I'm in a bad mood, and the hood goes up. And that's okay to kind of do that for an hour or 2 hours, or the evening, whatever I kind of need. Then the following day, I might be feeling a bit more sociable, and I might actually want to kind of do something else to get myself out of that funk a little bit. But I think, yeah, it's kind of finding what works for you, but knowing that some days that might be different. Some days I really want to go for a run. Some days I absolutely do not want to go out for a run. So kind of, yeah, I think being kind to yourself. And I think I'm still learning that as well, and learning what works for me. And I think it's an ever evolving process as we kind of get older, and kind of pain comes and goes, and kind of difficulties come and go. But at the moment, yeah, I think running and exercise has always been kind of a constant for me. So hopefully that's something I can continue use to help me feel good.
Yeah, I think that's honestly one of the best things that we can do. Obviously, I'm always saying how important physical exercise is for our physical health, obviously, but our mental health as well. It really does make a huge difference. Like, for example, yesterday I was just working from home all day and I was literally going crazy in my apartment. And I had a workout at home, but I was just getting to the point where I was just going crazy. I don't know, you know? So I just went outside and I just went for a walk, put my headphones on and just, walked it out and came back, and my mental health, my mood was completely different. And I really do feel like just getting in nature, getting outside, getting away, like escaping. Like if you're in an environment and you're feeling very anxious or angry or, going through the emotions of anything in life, going outside, going for a walk can be really, really beneficial, as well as calling a friend or family member or speaking to someone as well. I find that really helpful. Just like venting, letting people listen to your problems and things like that. I find that can be really helpful. But obviously keeping strong physically is going to help a lot with scoliosis and fusion related pain, keeping the muscles strong. So I feel like part of the mental health issues with scoliosis and fusion is pain related. So the best thing that we can do is look after ourselves so that we're not experiencing increasing and traumatizing amounts of pain, which I find, especially if you're sitting down at a desk all day every day and not doing anything outside of that, it's gonna produce a lot of pain. I think that it would be rare that didn't produce a lot of pain. So if that's you, definitely try and get outside, get moving. I mean, maybe you live in a rainy place like England or Vancouver, or a cold place, which I totally get, but it's still getting outside, going for a run, going for a walk, going for a jog, anything I find really, really helpful. And just being alone with your thoughts sometimes as well, and just seeing some nature and getting away from the cooped up in a tiny space sometimes. Like I was going crazy yesterday. Okay, amazing. So I'm going to come on to my last question, which I want to know if you have any tips for any of my listeners, anyone out there that is about to go through surgery or has just had surgery. What would you recommend?
I think for me it would be take your time. I guess kind of 10 years on, I'm probably at times still recovering from my surgery, and kind of, as we've said, actually sometimes there's this idea that surgery fixes everything, which sadly not all the time it does. So I think, yeah, take your time, but also sort of listen and trust your own body. So again, this was a big thing for me when I had my fusion, was I truly believe that your body is pretty good at telling you when something's too much. And for me, obviously, a lot of people were doing it out of love, but lots of people were trying to kind of give me advice or tell me what I should and shouldn't be doing. And obviously, listen to the surgeon and the doctors who kind of know what they're talking about. But at times, I had kind of friends chipping in with what I should and shouldn't be doing. And I was kind of like, well, you've never had surgery or scoliosis. Do you really know what you're talking about? So I think for me, it would definitely be actually, yeah, kind of once you're given the all clear and kind of the surgeons have discharged you or said that you can try new things, actually, if it's something that you want to have a go at, then I would kind of say within reason, kind of give it a go or give it a try. And if it kind of hurts, then obviously stop. But if it feels okay, then kind of carry on. And, if it is something like, I know when I was training for the marathon, kind of people were messaging me and sort of saying, oh, I wasn't sure about running, but I would kind of, go out for a walk and jog for a minute or jog to the lamppost. And actually, if it feels okay, then carry on. If it hurts, obviously stop. Or if it feels uncomfortable for you, then kind of maybe, you know, try something else, obviously. But I think sometimes there is sort of this fear around even trying anything in case you fail, or kind of, you know, what if it does hurt? Well, what if it doesn't? So I'd say, yeah, definitely listen to your own body and kind of, yeah, trust your body to tell you when it's too much. And I'd also, yeah, the process is long and the recovery is long. But again, weirdly kind of links to the marathon. I remember at about mile 23 or 24, there was a spectator just watching, and he shouted right foot, left foot, and he said, it's just right foot, left foot, one after the other, it's right foot, left foot. And I think, again, weirdly, that kind of has links to recovering from surgery, that there are going to be days when it feels really difficult. And I remember kind of sitting up for the first time after my surgery, and my back felt so heavy, and I thought, how am I supposed to live with this in my spine? But actually that feeling goes very quickly, and your body adapts really quickly. And some days the right foot, left foot is slightly easier, some days it's slightly harder, but actually one step at a time. And yeah, kind of trust your body and trust those around you, and yeah, actually try and sometimes see the positives, though I know it's definitely difficult on some days. But yeah, it's a long road, but I'd say it's worth it at times, because like you were saying earlier, I sometimes wonder the type of person I'd be without having gone through surgery, and I actually wouldn't have had half of the experiences that I've had because of my scoliosis. I wouldn't have been able to run the marathon. I wouldn't have kind of met all these amazing people that I've spoken to who've also had surgery. So I think, yeah, kind of look for the good in those little days, these little moments when it feels difficult.
Yes, I love that. I love that. And I 100% agree. Just trying to find the positives, and it is difficult. It is difficult, and I totally get it. But there are positives in every situation. What's the saying? Every cloud has a silver lining.
Yes.
And with scoliosis, there's definitely a silver lining in there. You'll find it, whether it's the friendships that you've made, or the experiences that you've had. Just there's things to be grateful for it. And I do think that should be the big takeaway from our conversation today.
Yeah, and nothing lasts forever either. I think sometimes in recovery it feels like the longest road or the longest mountain that you've got to climb, but actually looking back now, I can kind of remember those funny moments or weird things that happened during my recovery, and it seems like such a small part of my life now, actually. So
Yeah,
so much stuff has happened since then and will still happen. So yeah, I know sometimes, again, at times the days feel very long, but actually nothing lasts forever either. So
amazing. Well, honestly, thank you so much for coming onto my podcast and just being such a ray of positivity and hope for everyone listening who has probably gone through the same thing or is experiencing the same kind of emotions. And we need people like you and myself out here trying to make scoliosis less of a terrible experience.
definitely, it's so scary when you first are diagnosed and you've never heard of it, and you Google it and you get all these horrible images of kind of weird things. And you're like, what on earth is happening to me? So yeah, I thank you to you for kind of shouting from the rooftops about stuff.
Yes, and we can still run marathons, and you can still ski, you can still bungee jump, or I don't know. Maybe not straight after surgery, but
Yeah, my mum would definitely say I'm not allowed to bungee jump, but I think that's my choice rather than the surgeons.
Yeah. I know, I said it and I was like, can you still bungee jump?
Yeah,
I don't know.
maybe check that with your.
Yeah, I was like, maybe don't run to the bungee jump place right now. But I'm sure you probably could. I've bungee jumped before, but I don't have fusion surgery. So, and I would honestly never do it again because it was terrifying, but that's not scoliosis related. But anyway, what I'm trying to say is you can still do the things that you enjoy and live a very happy, healthy life, and maintain everything. So again, thank you, Victoria, so much for coming. I really appreciate it. And if my listeners want to reach out, what's your Instagram handle?
It is Scoliosisters. I think so. The spelling is like SCOLIOSISTERS. sisters_UK.
Oh, lovely. Yes. Well, if anyone listening wants to reach out and say hi or ask any questions about fusion surgery or mental health, then I definitely recommend reaching out to Victoria. And yeah, and let me know if you have any questions as well. Okay, well, I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you so much for coming, and I will speak to you soon.
Thank you for having me.